You, Megan.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Ferridan. I appreciate it. Yeah, so I guess just quickly on questions, I would prefer them to be at the end, but what we can do is if you make a note of your question, I'm always happy to go back into the specific area that you've got a question about. But I do have a specific flow, so it might throw me off if I start seeing things popping up. But by all means, put stuff in there. Hopefully everyone can hear me loud and clear. So as Ferridan said, I am going to talk about Dynamics 365 Customer Voice. So before we dig in, this is me. So some people won't know who I am, and that's fine too. But if you want to go ahead and check out any content, the best place really is to just go to my website, meganvwalker.com. And from there, I've got links to all of my social media profiles. And then the last link at the bottom there, I do a podcast that came out of COVID-19 lockdown and just a sense of wanting to do something new and having something to look forward to. So each week I record a podcast that's all about Dynamics 365, the Power Platform, just general Microsoft events, things that are going on, and that I record with Lisa Crosby, who's also a fellow MVP in Australia. So if you haven't heard that, we'd love you to go and check it out. All right, so we are going to talk about Dynamics 365 Customer Voice. So if you're not aware, we had the voice of the customer in Dynamics 365. That was deprecated, and they said, okay, well, we've got Forms, but we'll create something called Forms Pro, not to confuse people. And now it's Dynamics 365 Customer Voice. Again, trying not to confuse people. So we've gone through a few iterations of this. And when Forms Pro was released, I was actually in the middle of a project where we had essentially sold the customer on Voice of the Customer. Too many times customers said here. We'd sold them on Voice of the Customer, and then I realized Forms Pro was coming out, and I thought, hang on, there's no way that they're going to have both. So I realized I needed to start learning Forms Pro, and then started writing about it, and no one else really wrote about it. So I think I'm probably the only one that actually has a whole back catalogue of articles and videos all about it. And then they changed the name, and so they basically made all my stuff kind of crap and dull and void. So now I'm starting down the journey of customer voice stuff. So if you're not aware, the Dynamics 365 subscriptions, if you have a certain one, so if you've got sales, customer service, that type of thing, you're going to have customer voice as part of that. You can get an upgrade if you have a Microsoft 365, you've got one of the other plans and not Dynamics. You get it licensed based on the number of survey responses, not per user. It's not based on a user thing at all. And that's based on the number of survey responses received per month, not how many people you send an invitation to or anything like that, the number of responses. And with Dynamics 365, you get 2,000 free responses. And with Microsoft 365, you don't get any free responses included. So for that, you definitely have to be purchasing bundles, and you can get extra bundles for Dynamics 365. And those cost $100 per month at this moment in time as of the recording, but it cost $100 per month for an additional 2,000 responses. So that's just a little bit in terms of if you are not sure about it, you haven't actually been using it, that just tells you where it comes as free and then what some of the additional costs might be. But this is not a licensing presentation. So what are we going to cover today? So we're going to look at Dynamics 365 Customer Voice, and I'm going to do a full demo presentation and go through all of these different areas of the product. So what I'm going to be showing you is projects. We're going to look at the actual surveys themselves. We're going to be looking at branching rules. We'll look at satisfaction metrics, alerts, and that is hot off the press. Literally, I was working with the product team yesterday to try and figure out some bugs, and it's literally just now working, so I can show it to you. Variables, personalization, and then we'll look at the reports that come in Customer Voice as well. So those are all of the areas that we are going to cover. So let's go ahead and not waste any more time, and let's just jump straight into Customer Voice. So to access it, you go to customervoice.microsoft.com. That's where you go. And the landing page, we get logged in and we see a few sort of little widgets on this dashboard. So what we can see is some of the, well, first of all, it says good afternoon. It knows who I am and it knows what time of day it is, which is cool, if you like that sort of thing. And then we've got some widgets. So I can see some metrics based on some of the most recent sort of surveys or reports that have been coming back in with regards to actually getting some responses. I can see there for the annual customer feedback project, I've got a widget that shows me customer sentiment and satisfaction. And then for a support project, I see the same things as well. I can then jump straight into some of the either look at reports or surveys that I was previously working on, so I can continue working on some of these and have links straight to them. And then at the bottom here, we have tips and tricks, and these are basically videos that Microsoft have embedded into the product. And they change, I want to say maybe like every month, every couple of months, something like that. So you'll see different videos here. You can always go to their YouTube channel, and they've basically got a collection of videos about customer voice that you can access. Okay, so the first thing that we would do is we'd come in here and we would go ahead and create a new project. So if I click on the new project button, the concept of a project is previously with Forms Pro, if you think about Voice of the Customer, if you ever used that, which I loved that product, but if you ever used that one, then you had surveys, and those surveys were just kind of like independent of one another. So you have a list of surveys, there's no link to them. The concept of a project is to be able to take one or more surveys and combine them into one area that you can then look at either individually or as a whole, where you can see all of the metrics for a specific project. So if you consider somebody that is a customer support manager or customer service manager, and they might have different types of surveys that go out, they want to see the overall Net Promoter Score or the overall customer satisfaction score for every single response that kind of falls underneath their responsibility. So that way I can have multiple surveys, fit them under one specific project, so that I can then do my analytics based on the department or the area within the business rather than on an individual survey by survey basis. All right, so what we're going to see is a series of templates that we can select, and those give us kind of a starting point. So whether it's Microsoft or whether it's a partner, or in the future, whether it's you that's created a template, you can see what's available and you could pick one of these. You can also pick a blank one where you're basically starting from scratch. There's no questions already provided or anything like that. We're going to go and look at the support one. And what I can do is, if I want to see a little bit more about, well, what questions are on here, I can click this little play icon and it will open up the survey so I can see, okay, so there's 4 questions. I can see the information and then I can decide that's the one that I want to go with. So I'm going to go ahead and click next. And now it's asking, where do I actually want to put this survey? So which environment, or it's calling it location, but if you think about, if you've got Dynamics 365, you might have a production, a sandbox, you might have a development, you might have all kinds of different environments. And then you've also, whether you like it or not, you have this default environment as well. So I'm going to go ahead and click on See All Environments, and I'm just going to mention the elephant in the room. It still hasn't been renamed in a few places. So, and also I might say Common Data Service or CDS. That's fine. I know it's Dataverse. I'm not an idiot, but whatever. So Common Data Service, it still says that. These are my Dataverse environments. So you might have, you'll have at least the default. And if you've got Dynamics, you'd have at least one other. But all of the data that comes in from responses or any invitations that you send out, all of that is going into Dataverse. So just keep that in mind. If you don't have Dynamics, you can still use this. Everything's going to be stored there. You just might not necessarily care about accessing the data in quite the same way as someone in Dynamics. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and pick the sandbox. It's going to check and make sure that I actually have permissions to that environment I've selected. And then we go ahead and pick it, and then we click create. And it is literally as simple as that. I'm basically just saying, which template do I want to use? And then which environment do I want to put it into? We can see there that it's created our survey, and we can look at the survey. That's great. And what it's also done is it's created a few areas in the report section as well automatically, with the most important one at this point being our case resolution survey report area that we would come back to and look at the responses for that survey. All right, so we've got our questions, that's fine. So let's say that that's the standard one we're going to go for, but maybe we want to also add a second survey into this same project. So over on the left here, I'm going to click on New Survey, and I'm going to give this a subject, and this one will be maybe quarterly feedback survey. So that's what I'm putting as the title for that survey. And that's fine. That's what the customer or the respondent will see when they get the survey. I can then rename it because it's a really unhelpfully named survey 1. So I can click on the ellipsis here on this little drop down, and I can do rename, and I can say quarterly support feedback, whatever I want. So that's my internal name, so that I know what that is, but the title that's shown on the survey could say something completely different. All right, so now I want to go ahead and just add some basic questions. So I can click add new, I can do a text field, and I can put first name, and then I can click add new. And what it does is, depending on what I've typed, sometimes it will then offer me other suggestions and say, okay, well, you've put first name, maybe you want last name, middle name. I'm going to go with last name, and then I'm going to click add selected, and I'm going to change this because it really annoys me that it's not correct case, but there we go. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to add another text question, and this one, in this scenario, I wouldn't necessarily be asking for their email address, but I just want to show you this as an example. If I put email, I've then got options on these questions where I can toggle between certain things. So if I click here on the ellipsis again, I can do restrictions. And I can add a restriction and say, this must be an email address, so that when someone's typing, they must have the @ symbol, they must have a dot something in there as well, so that it knows that it needs to be an email address. Then what I'm going to do is add a rating. So I'm going to say, overall, how are we doing? And for this, I can select stars, numbers, or I can do the lovely smiley faces. If I do smileys, I can only go up to 5. I guess they couldn't think of 10 unique different faces. If I do number or star, I could go up to 10. Okay. Then what I'm going to do is I am going to select the Net Promoter Score. You can see here the different choices of questions. One thing that's really important to note, the file upload. You can have a question that's a file upload to where you're asking somebody to upload some kind of document. That's only available if your survey is an internal survey that you're sharing. You cannot currently have a file upload if you're sharing this with external people or anonymous people. So I'm going to go ahead with Net Promoter Score, and that is a standard question that every one of us has received a survey at some point in our lives, and invariably you will have the question at the bottom that says, how likely are you to recommend either our product or services or us to a friend or colleague? So you don't need, or you shouldn't need to be really modifying that question too much. Then the last one I'm going to do is I'm actually going to use the one that it suggests, and I'm going to say, what's the primary reason for your score? So I'm going to go ahead and add that. Now, the one that's the last one that I've just added, maybe I don't necessarily want them to tell me why they've given me a 9 or a 10, which would mean they're a promoter. I'm just happy that they're happy. And the same maybe with a passive as well. But if they are a detractor, which is basically a 6 or below, maybe then I want to say, okay, well, why did you give us that score? So this is where we can look at adding in branching rules. Now, a branching rule lets me set up some kind of logic that says, if this question is answered in this specific way, or this happens, let's go ahead and do something with another question, or let's redirect the person, that kind of thing. So over on the right-hand side in the customization menu, I have the option for branching. I'm going to click customize, and I'm going to give this rule a name, and I'm going to say NPS detractor, call it whatever I want. And the condition is when the question of how likely are you to recommend us to a friend or colleague, when that response is less than a 7, then if that is true, so if that condition is actually met, then I'm going to say, show the question, what is the primary reason for your score? Now, you'll notice that in this first one, it has all of the questions available. But in this one now, it only has the last one, because I can't go back up and say, oh, okay, force them to change their mind or change the answer to another question. So I can only then select something moving on. If false, I'm going to say, hide the question, what is the primary reason for your score? It's all I need to do. It's really straightforward. You can see here that we also have the ability to set up branching rules based on survey variables, which we'll come to in just a moment. But you can also say, if a variable equals something, then do something else. So your conditions are based on questions or survey variables. All right, so let's go ahead and save that. Now, if I'm to preview this survey just quickly and I scroll down, I can still see that last question, even though I said show or hide. And that's because my condition is basically saying, if the value that's selected here is this, do something, there's no value selected. So that's fine. All I need to do is come back to this question and then change it from visible and then flip it. And then basically that makes it hidden. So now we don't see the question unless I select something that's lower than 7, then it shows, otherwise it is hidden. So that's how you can look at some branching rules to where you could have a fairly complicated survey that actually you're trying to capture information from 2 different types of people, maybe 2 different types of users or customers, but based on the branching rules, you can kind of display 2 completely different surveys if you wanted to. All right, so we've got our branching rule set up. We've got all our questions in there. So the next thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to add in some satisfaction metrics. So satisfaction metrics is basically how happy are your customers. And there's really a couple of different ways in which you can measure that. The Net Promoter Score is one of the methods, and you've got some organizations that might use that. You've got some that will use CSAT, or customer satisfaction, which is based on a rating. You've got some that will use both, and then you can also track sentiment. So how happy is somebody based on the text that they've put in, and is that text positive, negative, or is it neutral? So if I now look over on the customization area and I click on satisfaction metrics, what we can do is we can set up metrics to basically track those trends in the responses that come back through. Now, remember when I started at the beginning and I created a project from a template, there were already some satisfaction metrics that were set up, and that was customer sentiment and customer satisfaction. So if I click on this drop down, I'm now setting up satisfaction metrics for our quarterly support feedback survey. But what it's telling me is it's saying, okay, well, customer sentiment is set up, and this is any other questions that are using the same metric. So we know on the case resolution survey, customer sentiment is being tracked by anyone responding to that specific question. So I can say, okay, that's great. For this survey, I am going to pick question 6. It will show any text question. I really am not going to track sentiment on any of these other things. That's the only one that it makes sense for. And then I'll go ahead and save it. Then I'm going to do the same thing for the CSAT. And again, I can see that on the case resolution survey, this is the question that's being used to track customer satisfaction. And for this one, I'm going to use the smiley face one of overall, how are we doing? I'm going to save that. And then the last one, because I've got Net Promoter Score question on here, I'm going to set that up and I'm going to say, well, I'm going to track this one. And the only possible question I can use for Net Promoter Score is the actual number 5 Net Promoter Score question itself. So I'm going to go ahead and save that one. All right, so I've got all my satisfaction metrics set up. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to set up alerts. Now, we've just looked at satisfaction metrics, and that is going to then give us some charts. It's going to show us overall, out of all of the responses that we've received, how are we doing in those specific areas. But what the alerts will allow us to do is actually say, okay, well, if a response is received from somebody and it meets these conditions, then we want someone to actually be responsible for then following up with that customer or looking into an issue or whatever that might be. So if I click on alerts, what we will see is the first time we're basically saying, okay, well, there's nothing there. So the only option we have is to create an alert rule. And it's showing us here that we can resolve issues as soon as they arise. So it's basically up-to-date information telling us, okay, there's a problem here. So I'm going to click Create Alert Rule, and I'm going to say unhappy customer. And then I get to pick, and this is why we look at satisfaction metrics and setting those up first. We then get to pick one of the metrics we created and then create an alert for it. So I'm going to say, okay, the sentiment, if the sentiment equals negative, that will trigger an alert so that then we know someone needs to follow up with that customer because they're unhappy. So we'll save that one. And then I'm going to go ahead and add another one in. And for this one, we'll do Net Promoter Score. And we'll say detractor created. And I'll say for the satisfaction metric of Net Promoter Score, if the condition is it equals a detractor, that will be a trigger. But we could also then do the same thing if it's positive. So I could say happy customer. And for this one, I could say customer satisfaction is greater than, let's do greater than or equal to a 4. So I can set it up because the alert might be, okay, we've got a really happy customer who's a promoter and they've given us a 5 on the customer satisfaction scale and it's positive sentiment. That's somebody that's happy. Maybe we'll take that opportunity to follow up with them quickly to see if they'll give us some kind of review or recommendation. So to really kind of jump on the positivity of that as well. So you could set alerts for positive things too. All right, so that's our branching rules set up, our satisfaction metrics set up, our alerts set up. So now we'll go ahead and we'll look at variables. So if I go back into the original survey that was created when I actually set up this and used the template for this project, we've got a customer service feedback. If I now go into the customization area and I click on personalization, some of these templates have variables that have already been created. Now, a variable is just a way to pass data through so that when we then send an invitation out to somebody, we can then populate the variable with an actual value. Now, I would never be one to criticize Microsoft, but to me, this is a really crappy variable. This is the only place that this is used. They haven't used it anywhere in the survey. And I would imagine company name, I would be putting the name of the company that the customer works for, but all this is being used for is in a standard template so that you would put the name of your company or the client that you're setting this up for, and that's what you would use it for. So it's a bit crap. Sorry, Microsoft, but it is. So I'm going to just delete that. I'm going to say I don't want to use that one. These two, first name and last name, you cannot delete them. They're basically set up and even though there's a little rubbish bin, notice that I can't actually click on that, whereas I could click on that. So it says up to 15. You've really got 13 variables that you can use because first and last name, that's it. You're stuck with them. The locale, what that is designed for is you can have surveys that are in different languages. Now you have to translate them yourself, but if you set up a survey in English, French, and German, for example, the locale variable you can use to pass through something that says, okay, John Smith needs it in English. but Vanessa Paradis needs it in French or whatever that might be. So you can pass through so each person gets it in the correct language. So we can leave that in there, that's fine, but that's what local is for, and that's why it's there automatically. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to add in case number, and I'm going to add case title. Now, if I put a space, it thinks it's a bad character, so just keep that in mind. You just have to make sure it's got no spaces. So I can put those variables. Now, the only reason I would put a default value is if the case number was the same for everybody, or the case title was, or whatever it was, then it would make sense to put something in there as a default so that it just populates. That's not the case here. We're basically going to be using a different case number and a different case title each time. So I'm going to go ahead and save that. As soon as I've done that, what I can do is I can say, we hope you had a great experience with our customer service. We recently closed case, and then I can click on variables and I can do case number hyphen case title. And then the person knows, oh, okay, they're asking me to share feedback about that specific case rather than anything else. Okay, so now I'm ready and I want to go ahead and actually send it. So if I go to the Send tab, and we've got all of these different options. Automation is Power Automate, and then embedding would be putting in your website. I could get the direct link and I can get QR code. I'm going to go ahead and pick email. And what I can do here is I can either use the standard template, or if you've got somebody in your marketing team, they can create templates using HTML. I could go ahead and I can actually import a survey from somewhere else. So I can click on these and I can see what some of the different surveys are that I've got set up. And then I can go ahead and say, okay, this is the one that I want. And I can go ahead and I can import it. And then I can select to use that one instead. So it looks a little bit nicer, maybe than the standard one. Okay. So that's fine. And then if I go ahead and I send this, let's go ahead and send this to my friend Jane Doe. So I can go ahead and I can send something out. But if I do it that way, the way I've just done it, then what that means is the person that gets the email, if they go ahead and look at it, instead of actually seeing the case number and the case title, it's going to just be empty. So instead, what I can do is if I go to Power Automate, and if I'm closing a case, typically you're going to have some kind of trigger that says, okay, the case is closed. Then I want that to go out. Here's another thing. It still says Forms Pro. So anyway, I'm going to pick this one, which is a template. So I'm going to say send a survey when a case is resolved. Now, we're not going to be digging into Power Automate too much. I just wanted to show you how you would pass the variables through to actually get the information to populate. So first thing it's saying, okay, common data service. We're seeing a bit of a trend here. I think Customer Voice has been kind of ignored with some of these changes. So if I go ahead and I say, right, I want to connect this flow to these two services, so to the Common Data Service or Dataverse and to Dynamics 365 Customer Voice, I'm going to go ahead and click Continue. And then what I can do is I can go ahead and create it. And it's created that behind the scenes for me. Now, I'm never one to just trust and say, oh, well, don't worry, it's been created, so it must be accurate. I would go ahead and I would say, well, let's actually edit this in Power Automate and let's just take a quick look. So I'm going to go ahead and click on Edit. And essentially, again, this is not going to be about Power Automate. And anyone that knows Power Automate will probably look at this and see so many things that are wrong with it because it's not using the current connector. There's things that I would do now that I would say, actually make sure that it only runs when a case is closed rather than having this. So that's not the point of this. Ignore that. What I want to show you is the step that is a step for the Dynamics 365 Customer Voice connector, that this is what gets generated and this is what will then be used to actually send out an email to somebody to say, hey, we've closed your case, go ahead and fill out this survey. So what this does, and essentially this flow is basically saying when a case is updated, check to see if it's resolved. Then it's saying is the customer an account or is it a contact? This is the path that I really care about. I'm saying it's a contact. Then what I'm doing is, because I started from that project, it populated the project for me. Because I was on that survey, it says, okay, well, that's the survey that you're sending out. Notice that both of those surveys that I see are in there. This is another really good reason to make sure that you name your surveys and also give your internal name as well, because you'll see both of those in the list. So it makes it a little bit easier to find. Finally, because I started from a specific template, it'll say, okay, that's the one I'm going to use. Now, here's the important part. What happens is when you send out an invitation to somebody to say, hey, can you fill out this survey? You can set that regarding something. So if you think about activities in Dynamics, or if you don't use Dynamics, but you use a model-driven Power App and you've created one and you're doing other things with it, activities like emails, like phone calls, like tasks, and so on, those are all linked regarding something. So typically, if you have a case and you're sending out emails, you're doing phone calls, that would be what you would use as the regarding. So this is saying, okay, this is going to be regarding the incident, and we're going to use the case ID to actually link this invitation to the case. And then we've got who's the recipient, and we're doing the same thing again. That's the name of the table or entity. And then we're basically pulling the contact ID to link it. It automatically passes through the first name and the last name. But notice at the bottom, we have case number and we have case title, because those are the new variables that I added. So I'm just going to go ahead and search for the case number, and I'm going to populate that. And then I'm going to do the same thing with case title, and then I'm going to populate that. And that's all I would need to do, is to go into that last step that is using the Dynamics 365 Customer Voice. So if I just do a quick search, Customer Voice, it's using that connector, and you've got two different triggers. I can either send out a survey, which is what I'm doing there, or I could create an invitation which generates a link, which I could then send out via Gmail, or I could send via a text message, that kind of thing. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and save that. And I'm actually going to go and see if I can find a case that I can then resolve quickly for Miss Jane Doe. Once my ribbon decides to show something. There we go. All right, so I'm just going to go ahead and resolve this quickly. All right, so whilst we're waiting for that, so that's one way in which to do it, is to use Power Automate. And like I said, those templates, they're a good way to see what is being done. But I would say if you really want to start using Power Automate to trigger those things, use that as a starting point to look through, but either completely modify it or just start again, because like I said, that's not the best way in which how flow should be built these days. So yeah, just keep that in mind. So let's see if this is, which one is it? I think it was this one. There we go. So now we can actually see there's the case number, and then there's the case title that have been populated. Now, what if you don't have Dynamics? What if you don't have a license for Power Automate? Or what if you just don't know how to use Power Automate and today is not the day you want to learn? So this was actually just new functionality was added last week, I think, maybe, or Friday, not that long ago. So this is another new thing. So alerts was the first new thing, and then this is also new. So if I go to all of my projects, I can see all of the projects that I've got within this specific tenant, and we can see actually it would show the different environments that they're linked to. I'm going to go to the annual customer feedback one. If I look at my personalization, I have several variables that I've added. So I've added organization, I've added account manager, I've added support tier. And then within the survey, I've used organization here, support tier here, and then account manager right here. Now, if I go to send this, what I can do is if I click on customization and I do distribution settings, I can say who can respond to the survey. I could make this an anonymous survey, I'm going to go ahead and flip this just so you can see what happens. So if I click on that, and then if I go to personalization, what this does is this allows me to say, okay, well, if somebody fills out a survey and you're passing through variables, do I want that to be saved directly within Customer Voice? So I'm going to tick all of these just so you can see what happens. And I'm going to go ahead and save it. Now, this is the part that this is new. And also I'm going to go ahead and I say I want to resend this. I'm going to pick email. And what I can do is I can click on import contacts. And what they've done is they've added in the functionality to where previously you could import contacts and you could import the first name, the last name, and the email, and that was it. Now, what I can do is it will give me a template that I can download. And let's just go ahead and open that. And what it does, it says, okay, well, these are all of the variables that you have. Email, first name, last name, organization, account manager, and so on. And then what it does is it adds on a regarding ID and a regarding entity name as well. So I could actually go ahead and get the IDs from Dynamics, and I could set the entity name as contact, and I can actually import stuff in and then populate without needing to do anything with Power Automate. So if I have one that I prepared earlier, little Blue Peter for those in the UK, and I go ahead and I open up this, it says, okay, well, the file's been uploaded successfully. It contains 9 different variables, and here's a look at the records. I can then say I want to update the contact information if those people are already in Dataverse or CDS. And then I can go ahead and click import. And it says, okay, you've got 101 recipients. Great. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to send that. Okay. So I have been able to then send out an email to all of those people without having to use Power Automate. If I go back and just refresh for a minute. This is where I get really impatient. So what that does is actually goes through all of the contacts that were in there, and then it sends them in batches. So I could be at the bottom. So we'll come back to that in just a minute. So that to me is huge because A, I don't need to know Power Automate. B, I don't need to have a license for Power Automate. And C, I don't actually need to link those and set a regarding. I can just go ahead and send it out. Maybe I've got stuff in a spreadsheet. Maybe I've got stuff in SharePoint. I don't have to know Power Automate at all. There we go. So that's the one that I've just sent through. If I now click on begin survey, now what we can see is it populated the organization name because I had that in the spreadsheet. It said, oh, okay, well, your support plan or your support tier is the gold. So let's go ahead and just fill this out, put some information in. It knows that my account manager is John Smith. John is great. And we'll say, yes, we'll recommend. So I can get all that in a personalized survey. Again, no need to be bothering with Power Automate if I don't want to. All right, so the next thing, we're coming to the end here. So now what we're going to look at is some of the reporting. So if I go back to all of my projects, I have a project here that actually has 3 different surveys in it. So it has a survey about feedback about videos, one about blogs, one about podcasts. Each of them have satisfaction metrics that have been set up. If I go to the satisfaction metrics area under reports here, what this is going to then give me is it's going to show me the satisfaction metrics for the entire project. So it will take all of that information and kind of combine it and say, okay, well, on average, you've got a 4.3 customer satisfaction score. Your net promoter score overall across all of these responses for all of these surveys is 63. And then the sentiment overall is positive. But then what I can do is I can say, okay, well, that's great. But what about for the survey that was about videos? And then I can see the results for that. And then I can say, well, what about blogs? And then what about podcasts and so on? So I can see all of that information at a top level. And then I can also see it individually. What I also have the ability to do is then look at the reports for each of those different surveys that then shows each question that was asked and what the responses were by being able to actually look at some charts, look at some graphs, that kind of thing. And then I can look at the respondents and I can open up and see individually, one by one, what this person actually responded with. Okay. Now, the last thing, if I go to one of my other projects and I look at the annual customer feedback, now with this one, what we're able to see is if we go ahead and look at the periodic customer survey and I look at respondents, and I think this one should have it. So this was one similar to the one that I just filled out, where I basically was able to pass through the account information, the account manager, that kind of thing. Because I flipped the switch that said store the variables as the responses come in, I can now actually see more information about who it was that filled it out. So even though some of the questions I've been able to say, hi, John, can you fill this out? I'm not going to see that on the response itself, because it's going to show the variable name. So if I'm like, oh, I wonder who this was, I can click on this data tab and I can see the values that were passed back through. Okay. And then finally, if I go into the alert section, so this is what will happen is, remember we set up some alerts and said, okay, well, if somebody fills out a response and the satisfaction metric of Net Promoter Score was a detractor, then what is it that we're basically going to say that will trigger an alert. So the alerts will be found in Customer Voice. They're also in your Dataverse environment as well. But focusing on Customer Voice here, what I can do is I can then go ahead and I can open that alert up and I can see, okay, so here's some information about it and the sentiment was negative and this is what the person said about their account manager. So what I can do is I can go ahead and I can assign it to somebody. Yeah. My mouse disappeared. And I can pick somebody that's within my environment. So I can go ahead and I can assign that to the person. So now I can see it's been assigned to David. David would be able to come in and David could put notes and say, had a call, was very annoyed, whatever, blah, blah, blah. And then finally, when they're going to resolve it, they can go ahead and they can put more comments in here. And then they can go ahead and click resolve. Now, again, this is from within Customer Voice itself. The data will show up in, so if I go into Dynamics and I look at these, there we go. So the data is being pushed back through. I could see the resolution detail. I can see who resolved it and that kind of, all of that kind of stuff. In terms of actually then being able to send what I would consider an action alert, which for me would be like an email that says, hey, there's something in here, then that would need to have something like Power Automate. At the moment, it doesn't send any kind of email. It just goes into Dynamics Customer Voice and you can see it if you're navigating through here. But I think it's a good next step to be able to actually see problems that are arising based on the satisfaction levels of your customers, and then be able to assign those out and have different people actually take responsibility for then following up with the customer and then resolving that problem and hopefully making them happy. So hopefully that's not too fast. I know that's a lot of stuff. I tried to literally do a deep dive and cover all of the aspects that I think are extremely important. It's by no means the only stuff that you can do. There's a ton of functionality in there, but hopefully that gives you a good idea of some of the things that you can achieve. So Feridun, back to you.
Thank you, Megan. Very, very informative and interesting presentation. I've certainly learned some of the features here. So yeah, anybody would like to ask anything of Megan? Grab the chance while you can. So we have one comment. That was brilliant. Thanks.
Welcome. I think Amanda has a hand up. You can unmute Amanda if you
yeah,
like.
feel free.
Hi.
Feel free.
Hi.
Hello, hi, thanks Megan, that was really, really interesting. I'm Amanda and I work at the Met Office in Exeter. We have Dynamics that we use. I have a question, it might seem a bit of a numpty question, but please excuse me.
No, it's fine.
There's no such thing
Oh, good. That's really
everything's
Don't worry.
complicated until you know the answer.
Yeah. So I've been diligently waiting for an install of the Customer Voice because I found it on AppSource from within Dynamics, but I don't have a global admin license, so I've had to put it through my IT department. So I was really interested that I can now access it via the web because I've just gone in and I can access it there. So what do you know what that AppSource app
Yeah,
does?
so you might be able to access it, and that's great. But what happens when it's when that install happens is there's actually a user that gets added. So like a customer voice user would be added that would have there's other things that get like click to mentions or marketing. They have users that are added that then things happen via that user. So you might be able to get so far and then you'd find things just wouldn't work. There's also the ability, there's also the ability to be able to remove people's access from within the administration area of Office 365. So again, I wouldn't miss out that part, and your admin will still likely need to do something. So I can't tell you exactly how far you'd get, but you would likely run into issues if you hadn't actually got that installed.
Great. Okay, so if we install that anyway, and does that give us those sort of entities in the menu that you had on your previous screen when you went to Dynamics?
No, so this is actually, you can see I've named this. This is a specific app that I created that I tend to use whenever I'm doing customer voice type things. Now, what I would suggest is if I go to let's see if I've got the service. Yep. I haven't been in any of the standard ones for a while, so they might have actually added stuff in there. There could be one of the standard apps that has it, but if not, whoever your admin person is that knows how to customize would basically just need to go and customize the Power App and then add in certain entities into the navigation area, into the sitemap.
Okay.
Yeah, you want to be careful about what you add though, because some of the things don't actually contain any data, and then also some things you shouldn't be allowing people to go in and make changes to, really.
Okay.
So from a visibility perspective, that's one thing, but I would definitely make sure your admin is aware and knows, okay, well, we want to see it, but we want to make sure that there's no access to edit any of that information.
Okay.
Okay.
Great. That's really helpful. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. No problem.
Yes.
Someone else has their hand up, I think.
Right. Hello. Gail's asking, is the 2,000 responses for the entire organization or per license? I guess per user license.
Well, so it's not. So it's not a per user. So yes, it's across the entire organization.
Yeah. And then there's another one about uploading attachments for external submissions. Would it be available soon? I think Forms Pro had this even for external users.
It didn't have it for external. And I don't know how much I can say. I don't have a time frame. I don't have a magic crystal ball, but I know it's something it's something that they're looking at. And believe me, Microsoft know that is a big thing that people want, but at the moment, no, and I don't have any time frame that I could give.
Okay. And there's one further back that I've just noticed. How do you move from dev, test, prod? I guess we're just talking about life cycles here.
Yeah. So good question. And again, I think this is something that definitely needs review. So one of the challenges is that you can't put these things into a solution, so there's no concept of a solution like there would be with like regular Dynamics configuration or anything that's kind of in the Power Platform. If you go on and make .power apps, what I can do is I can copy. So let's say that I've done all my testing and this one is in my sandbox environment. I could basically say, all right, well, copy this, and I want to copy it to production. So what it will do is it will take everything, meaning basically everything but the responses would be copied. So it would copy all of the branching rules, all of the satisfaction metrics, all of the alerts, all of that sort of stuff. So you can see at the top right there, it says that it's copying the project. So that would, and then you can see now the environment says production. So that would be the sort of step or the process that you would have to go through.
Excellent. I just wonder from me, actually, are there any downsides to developing some surveys and stuff in production? I mean, I guess, you know, you can develop it and not use it.
I guess the downside would be depending on how you then say you want to actually send out your surveys. So if I go to send, and let's say that I want to send an email. Now, one of the things, and again, love Microsoft. They've given me a career, not literally, but you know what I mean? Like I've put my career on their backs. But what I can do, see if I can make it do it. I can send a survey to a view.
Right.
Right. Which is in itself is like, oh, okay, well, that's kind of cool, because I could say I created a view and my view is all contacts that have recently had a case closed, or all contacts that we've just completed a project for. Fantastic. But if I pick that and I don't truly know what the filtering criteria of that view is, then, oh my God, like I could end up sending it to
millions.
Like, who knows, right?
Yeah.
So I would say the downside is that then the person that is doing the survey, how familiar are they with the data in production?
Yeah.
And we know that doesn't always correlate, correct?
Correct.
So I would say that is the downside for sure.
Okay.
Somebody asked about changing the emails.
Yes, that was Salish, yes.
I think, are you talking about who the email comes from?
Salish, why don't you unmute and clarify the question?
Sorry, yeah. So, hi.
Hi.
Yeah, the question is really, I knew under Forms Pro, you could put a request into Microsoft to say, can you change who you send it by? So the question I was going to do is, A, can you still do that? And more importantly, now that we've got projects, can you have a different email you're sending it from for each project? Because we do have different departments and they don't want it sent from the same place.
Got it. So you can, you can do what you were talking about. So for anyone that, let's see if I can find it. Change email sender customer voice. If not, I can share it in the
bingo.
What great Google search skills I have. So there's an article here, which I will paste into the chat, that you basically can use. So yes, you have to set up you have to open up a case with Microsoft still, but it used to take forever and it's supposed to be a lot faster now. There's work that you would be needing to do within your own DNS area, so you'd need somebody that has that level of access to be kind of a part of that process, because you get authentication key information that proves you own the domain, and then you basically, if anyone has ever heard of a DKIM record, basically allows emails to come and be sent through another third-party tool, and for it not to then be blocked. So yes, that is still the case. And then on the you wouldn't do it at the project level, but you would do it at the survey level. You have distribution settings, and I don't know if you can see right here. If I had additional email addresses, I would see those all in a drop-down list, and then I could pick the appropriate one for that specific survey. Does that help?
Yeah, that's great. That's exactly what I need to know.
Excellent, yes. But it's not at the project level. It would be at the survey level within each one.
Right, okay.
Awesome.
I think there's a clarification on the licensing from Deborah. The 2,000 responses per month for free. Does this apply to enterprise license agreements?
Yeah, so that's the one where you'd get for those licenses, you'd get the free 2,000 free responses. So yes, that's exactly right. There is a list somewhere that says which licenses get it. Which I think is probably this one, or if not, I will find it for you. But there's a list that is clear that says exactly which ones get the free and which ones do not. Yeah, right, exactly, right here. So it's included with 365 Sales Enterprise, Customer Service Enterprise, blah, blah, blah. So I'll paste that one in the chat as well.
Sorry, can I just ask, would it be? It was £100 for 2,000 licenses. So wouldn't it be cheaper just to buy a sales license?
$100, and I do not make any further comments on licensing or costs. No idea.
But then if you had more than 2,000, you'd have to probably buy more bundles.
Yeah, I think so, and I do not know because I was not involved in the research, but from what I understood, when they came up with the 2,000, this was based on looking at usage of voice of the customer and looking at actually the number of responses that would come through on average for voice of the customer. And I think there was maybe like 5 or 10% of customers that would fall outside of that and actually need more, but the majority got less than 2,000 responses a month. Again, I don't know how accurate that is, but I do understand that there was some sort of level of research done, and it wasn't just plucked out of thin air.
Thank you. Right, I think we need to wrap up because we need to get to the next session. So that was absolutely fascinating, Megan. Thank you ever so much. So perhaps I could get everybody to show their appreciation in the usual way, please. Thank you.
Oh, thank you.
Thanks, Megan. That was brilliant.
Thank you.
So please fill in your feedbacks when you have time, and the next sessions, which will start in about 2 minutes, you can go to CDS and Model Driven Apps, your enterprise solutions platform, a roundtable discussion on going from on-premises to online, or let's play with Dataverse for Teams. All right, enjoy your next sessions, and thanks again, Megan.
Thanks, Ferdinand. Bye, guys.